Hey, welcome back, my friends. My name is Danny Dumas, and this is the Internet Podcast. What if I told you there was one number, one single metric that you could measure your life by that would scientifically prove whether you would die or not, or how quickly you die, how early you would die? It's more important than your BMI, how much you weigh. It's more important than what your cholesterol numbers are, what your blood pressure is. It's more important than your genetics. It's more important than whether you smoke or not. That number is your VO2 max. 3 weeks ago, I got sick. I got a fever. I wasn't feeling well. The fever lasted for about a day, and then the feeling of just generally feeling crappy was like 2 more days, and I pretty sure I had COVID. My taste buds changed, and just wasn't good. It kind of was going around our family. It was going around the school my kids went to, so I got sick. Well, I went back to work, and I'm walking up the stairs at work, which my office and bedroom are upstairs, and I was winded. I was just like, man, my heart was beating fast. I thought, did I just get really out of shape? And it kind of worried me a little bit. And I realized after a couple of days that improved, and I got back to normal, and I was running up and down the stairs. But it got me thinking, like, how am I doing cardiovascularly? You know, and I know there's a number called your VO2 max, which is the maximum rate your heart can pump. It's the maximum stroke volume. It's how much oxygen you can use at its peak. You know, it's what makes your body go at the very, very top. And I knew that that's a number that's important. And I went down this road of starting to investigate, well, how am I actually doing? If you have an Apple Watch or any smartwatch or a ring, smart ring, they can track that. There's some tests you can do. There's scientific tests that are very clinically accurate. The ones with your watch and your phone, they're okay. They're more of an estimate of your VO2 max than the actual number. So I looked mine up, and I was at a 35, which is below average. And that worried me. It worried me because VO2 max is the number one predictor of all-cause mortality in human beings. I mean, literally, you could be a smoker with a high VO2 max, and you are scientifically going to live longer than someone who is average or below average VO2 max and doesn't smoke. Like, that's a really big deal. So I decided to go down the rabbit hole a little bit and share what I've learned. And I feel like I've known this, but I hadn't internalized it, and I hadn't made it a priority. Over the last year or so, I've been lifting weights pretty consistently, and getting stronger, I do think is super important. It's probably the second metric of whether you're going to live a long time is, you know, can you lift things? Can you get yourself off the ground? Are you strong? That's a huge deal. But this VO2 max number is proven to just show higher VO2 max is a decrease in all-cause mortality. So I went down the rabbit hole, and when I have a medical problem or a medical question, there's 2 guys that I go to ask. One is Andrew Huberman. The other one is Peter Attia. So I went to Peter Attia, and I listened to a podcast talking about cardiovascular health. He's really good, and I've read his book, which I believe is called Outlast. I will, or Outlive, or Outlast, I forget. I will link that in the show notes. Really good. Talks all about the metrics that you need to live a long, healthy life, and not just live a long time, but live a good long time. You know, it's one thing to live to 90, but you spend the last 10 years, sitting in a chair. It's another thing to live to 90 and to just have one bad day. And that's, that is my goal. So I listened to this podcast, and he's really good. He knows what he's talking about. But this was a line in the podcast. And I think a lot of guys hear things like this and they just tune it off because it sounds ridiculous. I'm going to read it because it's pretty in depth. So here it is. The way ATP works is they donate ATP, which has 3 phosphates. They donate one of the phosphates, and that's the liberation of energy that comes from the chemical bond that creates energy. The mitochondria can generate ATP from either fatty acids or pyruvate. Pyruvate is an intermediate breakdown product of glucose via the process called glycolysis. And both of these processes are constantly occurring. Just the question is, what's the balance in which they are occurring? And of course, they don't both occur equally. No, they're not. Each process has a trade-off. If you do not have a scientific background, if you do not understand biochemistry, the mitochondria chain of producing energy, that sounds like a bunch of garbage, but just a bunch of gibberish. And so I want to break down what that means. Now, I'm not a scientist. I do have an associate's degree in a medical field, which is, the minimum level you need to be a paramedic. So I think I understand what he's saying, but I don't understand all the words. And if I don't understand it, and I literally deal with, medicine and the medical world on a daily basis, the odds are that you don't at all. So let me break down with you VO2 max, as well as aerobic capacity, which is kind of like the two ends. And the analogy that Peter did give, and it is very clear, and I really appreciate it, I'm going to steal this, is the triangle. You have a cardiovascular triangle. So if you picture the triangle, the very top is your VO2 max. Basically, this is as hard as you can go. It is the amount of oxygen you're able to use. It's the strength at which your heart beats. It's all the factors that allow you to go hard. And that is the top of the pyramid. Then you have your base aerobic capacity. That is the bottom of the pyramid. This pyramid, the goal is to get it larger. And there's two ways. You can raise the top, which makes the area of the triangle bigger, or you can expand the base, which makes the top even bigger. So you could just do a low-level aerobic work, and we're going to call it zone 2, and I'll explain what that is shortly, and improve your VO2 max, because you're improving the overall area. And when you move the bottom out, the top will move out as well. You get some more area in that VO2 max. The other way is to take your VO2 max number up. That also increases it. But there's pros and cons with both, and there's challenges with both. A couple sobering statistics as I get older, and why I feel like I probably need to worry about this a little more. Your VO2 max is your retirement account for health and longevity. What do I mean by that? Well, if you understand the power of like compounding interest, like if you were 20 years old and you started investing $100 a month, you could invest $100 a month till you're 60 and you have like $5 million. Where if you wait to start investing till you're 40, it's like $700 a month or $800 a month, because you've lost the time, right? You haven't invested early, so you've lost the time. Well, unfortunately, somewhere around your 40s, you start losing 10% of your aerobic capacity per decade. That's kind of worrisome, right? You're losing aerobic capacity. So as a younger person, when you have the ability to develop that easier, you can put money in the bank. It's your retirement account for health and longevity. So that's important that we do it early and we do it often. So VO2 max is the top, aerobic base is the bottom. How do we increase our VO2 max? Unfortunately, the easiest way, or not even easy, the simplest way, that's the right word, because it's not going to be easy, is to max out your heart rate for extended periods of time. And by extended, I mean 3 or 4 minutes. There is the gold standard of maxing out your heart rate, going all out effort, and that is the Norwegian method. This is going to be 4 minutes of, it's not all out, because the human body really can't go all out for 4 minutes. So this is 80 to 90% of what your max heart rate would be for about 4 minutes. Then you take a 3-minute break and you try to go again. That would be the 4x4 Norwegian method. So what does it mean? How do you go out? Well, one way, and I think most people default to this, is running. But as you get older, one of the things you have to worry about is that as you're putting in the effort, right, you need to be able to put in 100% cardiac effort, or near 100% cardiac effort. And if you're limited by your physical abilities, for instance, if you grew up playing football or a contact sport, your knees might not enjoy running all out for 4 minutes. So you have to find something that allows you to go all out without being limited by joint pain or back pain or shoulder pain or whatever that is. So for me, what I find, the rowing machine is a good one, and the Airdyne bike. Now the Airdyne bike is a demon. It's a demon tool. I hate it, but it gets my heart rate up faster than anything. I have to work pretty hard on the rowing machine to get my heart rate up to, the max after 80, 90%. Where the Airdyne bike, and if you're not familiar, Airdyne, it's got the big fan on the front. It's got a thing for your hands where you push your hands back and forth, and you're pedaling like a bike. That thing gets my heart rate going in like 5 seconds. But you want to get your heart rate up to that 80, 90% mark. And the important part, when I'm saying these percentages, it can be challenging, because what is 80% for you is not 80% for me. And if you don't have a heart rate monitor to check this, an easy way for all out effort is, could you say your entire address? Could you say 123 East Main Street, any city, USA. If you can, you're not going hard enough. All out effort is one word sentences. Yes, no, you just, you're out of breath as you're doing it. You could not hold a conversation. If you could tell someone that you're feeling terrible, you're not going hard enough. And this is really tough because that's challenging. That is challenging to get your mind around going all out, but it's really important. So if you're doing these, the 4x4 method, what I found is I usually go really hard for a minute and then I start to taper off, and that's not what you want. It takes about 2 minutes for the stroke volume in your heart to go up and to really get to that point where you're really working hard. So you want to ramp it up to the last minute is your hardest minute. So if you're going and your first minute was your hardest minute, you went too fast. So this might take you some time. This is a skill to be able to get your heart rate up and have that maintained. So I would encourage you to practice and do it. And I realize I've neglected it. My VO2 max, according to my watch, was 37. Now, the ranges in VO2 max are going to vary greatly. I looked at the scale and actually goes down to 10, but I think 10 would be someone who literally doesn't move and is, a quadriplegic and can't do anything. So the lowest levels are going to be right around your 20s, and this is age dependent. Elite, like US, because, God bless America, Olympic swimmers, could be up in the 70s. 50s would be like elite, normal athletes. Like you get to 50, you're doing great. So somewhere between 20 and 50 is what you'll probably ever hope to see, unless you are truly an elite athlete. But that 35 was below average for my age. I should be up closer to 30 or 40. Obviously higher is better. I'm looking for a way to do that. Now, the Norwegian method scientifically seems to be the best. What's another way? You could do 30 on, 30 off. There's also the 20 on, 10 off, which is a Tabata. The goal with this is to still get the same amount of time in that peak zone. It just might take a little longer. Instead of 4 minutes, you might need to go 6 or 8 minutes, but you're taking a 30-second break, and it allows you to catch your breath. And I think mentally, this is a little bit easier to do, is to go all out for 30 seconds, knowing in 30 seconds you have a break. So you might do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 8 minutes, as opposed to 4 minutes in a row, and still get the amount of time in that range. And it's still good. You're still getting some results, but you do need to go hard. You need to get your heart rate up so you're out of breath, and you need to put money in the bank so that when you're 80s and in your 90s, you have the ability to play with your grandkids. You have the ability to get on the floor and get off the floor again. You're going to lose your VO2 max. It's going to decrease 10%. So fill up the bank right now. Now, this is one part of your cardiac ability. The other part is the base, is the bottom of the triangle. And this one is not as physically taxing to get, but it does take more time. So if you only had so much time in the day, let's say, I think Peter Attia, he recommends 150 hours of physical activity a week. And you are going to spend half that time weightlifting. So you have 75 minutes of weightlifting and 75 minutes of cardio. It would be beneficial to try to spend a good portion of that time in that VO2 max, like pushing it, because you don't have a whole lot of time. But the problem with VO2 max is it's taxing. And as I get older, I realize I don't like it as much. Like I don't enjoy the feeling of being physically exhausted, and it's really hard to recover. At my age, at 45, I'll be 46 in a couple months, I shouldn't be doing high intensity workouts at my max more than once or twice a week. So what do I do with all the other time? That is when the base comes in, and it's the zone 2. If you've listened to any podcast about health, if you read anything, if you watched any clips on the TikTok, they are talking about zone 2 and the importance of it. And it is truly important. But what isn't zone 2? Zone 2 isn't walking on the treadmill at a leisurely pace. If you don't feel your heart rate beating at all, if you are not a little bit out of breath, you're just going for a walk. And this is fine. Like I have realized how important walking is to my life, but it is a health standard, I'm not improving my physical ability. I'm maintaining my health. I don't know if that makes sense, but going on a walk to me is like a meditation. I'm going out, I'm breathing the nice clean air. If I'm not feeling good, I go for a walk instead of working out. It's how I stay consistent with staying active. But you're probably not going to change a lot by just going for a walk. You need to get to your heart rate zone 2, where you are able to speak in shorter sentences, but you still have a little bit of maybe you're talking as much as I am, and then you're gasping for a little bit of air. Another way to determine zone 2 is if when you're breathing through your nose, you're breathing in your nose. If you get to the point where you have to start mouth breathing, you've moved outside of zone 2. And then it's a range, right? You're not going to nail zone 2 where you're at 60, 70% of your heart rate, but it's important that you try, because that is the best way to build your base. Now, if you get up to zone 3 or 4, and again, it's all fluid, but if you start working a little bit harder, you are going to tire out quicker. You're not going to be able to go for as long, and you're really not getting the benefits of the super high intensity. So you might as well back it down a little bit, stay in zone 2 where you can have a 2 or 3 word sentence conversation with people as you're taking breath. That's where you're going to get the majority of your base fitness, and you should try to stay there. So what is happening between zone 2 and your VO2 max in this base? Well, it's helpful for me to think of a bucket. And in this bucket, I'm filling it up with fitness, right? I'm filling it up with effort. And if the bucket overflows, I have to stop pouring effort in. And with your zone 2, there's a hole in the bottom of your bucket. And this hole is dripping out lactic acid. Lactic acid is one of the things that causes you to stop working. It starts producing lactic acid when you're working so hard that the oxygen that you're breathing in can no longer be used, and you have to use some other things besides oxygen. So when you use oxygen, it's called aerobic. So when you're doing aerobics, you're using oxygen. When you go beyond the point where you're breathing so hard into that VO2 max, you're not aerobic, you're anaerobic without oxygen, and you're using other systems in your body to produce energy. So you're not using fat, you're using sugar. And I don't want to get into it because as I read that first statement from PRT, it can be very confusing. So when you increase your base of zone 2, you're opening that hole up so that the lactic acid is dripping out the bottom as you're filling up the effort in the top. So you're able to go longer for a longer period of time at a higher intensity rate. So you're building your capillaries in your lungs or in your vascular system. So for instance, zone 2, what does it do? If getting your VO2 max turns your Honda Civic into a Porsche, right? It's going faster. Your zone 2 allows the Porsche to go into a wider road so they don't have to slow down. It takes away or it adds lanes of road so that you can go really fast, right? Because it doesn't do you any good to go really fast and there's a traffic jam. So by going into zone 2, you increase your ability to have more vessels filling your muscles with oxygen. It's this base level. You need zone 2 in order to have a higher VO2 max. You can get both, right? You can get more lanes by having a high VO2 max, and you can get a high VO2 max by getting more or a bigger base. So you can just do one, but what I found is I can't do VO2 max every day because it sucks. It feels bad. And 2, I just don't recover as a 45-year-old man. So it's really important that we do that. It's really important that we make that a conscious effort. And it is, I want you to think of it as an investment, because it really is an investment into your future. We spend a lot of time thinking about money and how are we going to retire and how we're going to not run out of money. And a lot of us don't think of how are we going to do all of that at the same time, live a good life. Because it's not about living to be 90. It's about living to be 90 and doing things, right? And going out and enjoying life. As a paramedic, I see a lot of people who suffer through the last 5 or 10 years of their life in a pretty terrible state where they're just laying there waiting to die. They don't have really any major underlying disease. Maybe they don't even have cancer or heart disease. They just can't do things. So they sit there and they rot away. And that is not something I want. And that's not something I want for you. I want you to develop your VO2 max. So go and work hard. And this sucks. Just do it. And I am committing to working harder at this. I was a little worried when I saw my number. It's lower than it should be. I don't want to be those people. And I realized that because it does suck and I don't enjoy it, I have decreased the amount of high intensity work that I'm doing. So I'm going to try to do once a week at least. I'm okay at doing my zone 2. I think I've kind of figured out things that work for me, but I haven't been going all out. So I'm going to go all out, and I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you this week to work so hard that you're out of breath and you feel like you couldn't go a second longer for just a minute. And then maybe next week you try it for 2 minutes. And then you work up to 4 minutes, and you study the Norwegian method, look into different modalities of getting your heart rate up. And there's a lot. And again, this is science, and science is, they're constantly figuring things out. What they think they know for sure, they get a little more data, but the data is pretty solid on VO2 max being important. So go out and boost that number up, and then let me know. My email is danny@dannydumas.com. If you start down a journey and you start getting your VO2 max levels up and you start feeling better, let me know how that goes for you. It'll be motivating for me to stay with it. Maybe I could share that story with everyone else. So I want you to go out and become a healthier man. I want you to live a long time so you could be a good husband, a good father, a good leader. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. My name is Danny Dumas, and I will talk to you later. Bye.